street. Come and take a seat. I got every cut of pork that you want to eat. I want the whole lot. I don't want that piece of meat. I want the whole lot. Oh, the pork, it tastes so sweet. I want the whole lot. I don't want no head, no leg. Oh, that's good, you're running scared. Went to Bennett's Harbor, there along the street. I saw the hawkman, he was selling meat. He said, I know what you come for. I can't fill that order. You got to go to Arthurstown and look for Mr. Goggle. I want a whole lot. Oh, I don't want that piece of meat. I want a whole lot. Oh, the pork, it is so sweet. I want a whole lot. I don't want no head, no leg. I want a whole lot. I got the butcher running scared. It tastes so sweet. I want the whole lot. I don't want no head, no leg. The whole lot. I got the butcher running scared. Thank you. Thank you very much. We're going to introduce the Cat Island dancers as they come. Thank you very much. I had to take you to school this morning, give you your times table. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much, Ophi, and the website. We'll see you in Grand Bahama playing soon. Next selection will be coming from the world famous Royal Bahamas Police Pop Band.
Two.
Bahama District Pop Band. Okay. Sorry about that. You want to be very distinguished. Okay. I got you. My apologies. Like that very soon. It's Grand Bahama Police Pop Band. Been waiting for. Please stand for the raising of the flag and the national anthem. Our closing prayer by Pastor Conrad Jones, Church of God Temple.
Thank you so much. Right before I pray, I want to just thank all of you for being here. On behalf of our Honorable Minister, we want to thank the amazing police pop band. Would you give them a hand? I don't know what Nassau sound like. Well, yeah, I know a little bit what Nassau sound like, but I ain't with Nassau. These fellas, them on top. And that song I remember and way back then, but I start singing, I want the whole hog. We want to thank all of our senior government officials from Customs, Immigration, the Royal Bahamas Police Force. We want to thank our administrator, the local government council, all of you that played and continue to play an awesome role as a part of the Independence Committee for planning and the execution of the event. Pastor Barry Morris, Sister Tamar, Ferguson, and all of those persons that would have fed into this event. Let's give them a round of applause. All right, so let's pray as we wrap up. Almighty God, today we stand with a posture of thanksgiving and gratitude for all that you have blessed us with and how far you have brought us as a nation. As we have raised our flag today and have done so many times over the past 48 years, may we continue to be true to the principles that we have espoused with this symbolism. We have agreed that the black in our flag represents the vigor and force of us all as a united people. May we continue to focus on the many wonderful things that unite us over the few things that distract us. We have agreed that the triangle pointing towards the golden aquamarine represents our enterprise and determination as a people to develop and possess the rich resources within our nation for the betterment of us and our children. May we not be sidetracked by pride and greed and short-sightedness, but may we recognize that we are responsible for the things we do today which will affect our generations tomorrow. May we truly recognize that we are one people, one blessed nation under God, given the opportunity to build on the legacy and the heritage of what our founding fathers and mothers have fought for us to have. We thank you for your grace and peace being multiplied to us through the knowledge of Jesus Christ, your Son. Bless the food and all of the preparations now. In Jesus' name, and we all say, amen.
Before we depart, I just want to say these few words to you. Freedom is a special gift from God. May we always remain independent and free. I want everybody to join me and repeat after me, please. I am proud to be a Bahamian. I am proud to be a Bahamian. God bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Happy independence, everyone. Happy independence to all. Before we close, let the band play on. Let the band play on.
Come on. it was. But Moxley mentioned earlier, this ceremony was just our country's 49th independence. At 6:30 for team place in the East and West District today as well. But until then, have a great be independent.
Independent Bahamas, Bahamas, Bahamas. We now get together, brothers and sisters, to join in unity for independence.
We're sitting here at our recently constructed observation deck at Harold and Wilson's Pond National Park. This is going to be the biggest undertaking that we have done as an organization with respect to the potential to reach the highest percentage of our population. We expect to have trails that run along old causeways that are part of the system, thousands of feet of first-class boardwalk, several observation decks, a couple of observation towers, a visitor center. You have interpretive panels that are going to be all along the boardwalk.
Well, we're definitely still developing the park. In the near future, we're hoping to have some kayaking facilities so we can do some kayaking as well as the bird watching. For the next year, we're going to be bringing school groups here pretty much on a daily basis. We're hoping that every school, particularly in New Providence, but also from the Family Islands, come down here to utilize this park.
From its biological or ecological perspective, this wetland system is perhaps the most important inland wetland system on the island of New Providence. It is easily the most important for not only migratory waterfowl and shorebirds, other wetland birds, but also for resident birds as well. So this is an important system.
People who are very interested in birding would come to this area and come bird watching. And it wasn't until there was a competition on how many birds that you could actually find that people realized that this is where you found the highest concentration in such a small area. And that's when everybody started getting a lot of interest in this area biodiversity-wise. The most important reason to protect this area definitely is because of the bird life here, particularly migratory species. You get species coming from as far away as Canada coming to use these ponds at certain times of the year. Over 100 different bird species have been seen utilizing this small area, which is, 250 acres. We have quite a bit of plant life, a good number of Bahamian representatives typical of inland wetlands, particularly the buttonwood and the leather ferns. Here we have a leather fern, which is a Bahamian native species. You find it typically in inland lakes around the Bahamas. They're quite spectacular. They're very large growing ferns and very typical of the landscape. Ferns are an ancient group of plants that have been here since before the time of dinosaurs. And here we have some buttonwood. And these trees get their names from their inflorescence that eventually turns brown, and they become much bigger than this, and people think it looks like buttons, so that's where buttonwood got its name. We have a lot of invasive species that have been taking over our wetlands. We have, of course, the casuarina, which is a major problem. Brazilian pepper is probably one of the worst. Cattails for this area.
The rate at which these cattails have advanced is phenomenal. We're going to be looking at controlling cattails through the use of mechanical removal.
It's one of those, we love to hate it, because cattails actually, it's known that cattails are really good at cleansing polluted water. And so having the cattails here is actually kind of good because it's helping to clean the water out.
They serve as natural habitat, as they would be on the edge of systems for birds to retreat, either to rest or perhaps even for nesting activities.
But when it gets really dry, cattails go very brown. They're starting to go very brown now, and that is a major fire hazard. So for us, it's also that sort of issue as well as the invasive. And here we have Brazilian pepper. It's quite easy to identify. It has these opposite leaves, and they, with the one here, because they are odd in numbered, but also they always have this red-ish stem here with a bright green typical leaf. But the biggest giveaway is their smell when you crush the leaves. You can actually smell that pepper smell. It particularly loves wetlands, but you'll find it all over the place. They really do invade areas and push out the Bahamian native species.
They are also going to be the focus of aggressive management and eradication programs.
It's a problem for our species. We're certainly losing a lot of Bahamian native plants as a result to invasives in general. And one of the main problems is that, you know, areas like the Bahamas is starting to look like all other parts of the world. This homogenization, we are losing our, what I regard our true national identity, which is our Bahamian plants. Like most inland wetlands, they play a very important role for recharging the freshwater lens down below. Places like down Fire Trail Road and places like that, they do still use well water, so it is in their best interest that this area is kept pollution-free.
It's a very important area from the point of view of alleviating flooding for neighboring communities.
Wetlands historically have always been used as dump sites because they're always the lowest point in the land. You know, certain companies dealing with a lot of oil and a lot of toxic chemicals will often use wetlands to discard those chemicals as well, so that's a major problem. Development obviously is a major problem for wetlands throughout the Bahamas because it permanently alters the landscape, and often it takes 50 to 100 years for it to recover. If it wasn't protected, its loss would have had a significant negative impact on especially the waterbird avifauna of New Providence. It's got a special look to it. It's actually very nice and quite pleasant. You get a nice breeze out here, so it's a nice, pleasant place to visit. Even though we are in the heart of a city, you can come here and almost feel like you're in a wilderness area somewhere.
Nature-based tourism supplies almost $50 million in revenue for Androsians every year. These priceless resources will continue to provide renewable benefits for thousands of people for years to come, as long as we take long-term action to preserve what's rightfully ours. The natural environment has played a vital role in our culture and economy for generations. Let's take care of nature, and nature will take care of us.
A census determines the total number of people living in a country. Our census is currently being conducted throughout the islands of the Bahamas. I plan to participate. You should too.
We want everybody on every island, regardless of your age or nationality, to be counted.
And if they ain't been to your door yet, they're gonna be there soon. I know we gonna get counted in this census, so don't let them miss you.
The data collected in the census is used by the government to make all kinds of important decisions for the future of our country. I'll be participating. You should too.
When the census workers were in my area, I had the option whether to do it face-to-face or on my cell phone. I participated. So should you.
The Bahamas National Statistical Institute needs nationwide participation. The census will be conducted until the end of August. Remember, when it's your turn, the count depends on you.
You're watching the ZNS Network, the People's Station.
Coming up, hammering out the mighty axe. Stitching up the ultimate carry-all, the bicycle messenger bag. And powering ahead the world's fastest lifeboats. How do they do it? The axe, one of the greatest inventions in human history. Axes cleared the forests, making space for crops, provided wood for building and fuel for fires, and became a deadly weapon of war.
Vikings are probably the most famous axe-wielding warriors in history. But when they weren't chopping off heads and limbs, they mainly used their axes for chopping wood.
Today's axe is an engineering masterpiece. The latest chapter in an epic tale of the union of steel and timber. How do they do it? In the heart of Viking country, in Sturvik, Sweden, Betteling Swedish Axeworks has been handcrafting axes since the 19th century. CEO and axe enthusiast Julia Kaltoff explains their appeal.
In Swedish, we have an expression that says that it makes the man's arm longer. The axe is the ultimate tool, in my opinion. You can use it to build a house, heat your house, make furniture, pretty much everything.
Before they can craft their axes, they need steel that's tough enough for the job. For that, they turn to steel specialist Uvaku, in business since the 17th century. At their plant in Smedjebacken, they produce over 300,000 tons of steel every year. That's enough to build the Eiffel Tower 40 times over. Making steel requires iron. This company's source is scrap. Mounds and mounds of the stuff.
Across the world, we use 1,500 million tons of steel every year. That's enough to build 63,000 Titanics. It's everywhere, from the Empire State Building to fracture plates used to hold together broken bones. Steel, together with concrete, is pretty much what our modern world is made of.
The first step is to melt it. And that's left to this beast. A furnace that's 1 part Middle Earth and 1 part alien mothership. A series of electrodes jolts the iron with controlled electric lightning, heating it up to 1700 degrees Celsius. Workers keep well clear of the furnace, controlling high-powered jets from behind a heat-proof screen. These jets blast in oxygen to speed up the melting process and get impurities out. But ordinary steel isn't hard enough for making axes. So they add other metals to the mix. Getting just the right steel for an axe head is a job for product development manager Anneli Anhelm.
You need a very high hardness when you do the heat treatment of the very tip of the axe, but you also need some kind of good toughness. To combine these two is not that easy, but we think we have found the formula to do it.
It's an art as well as a science, and the next stage in making a masterpiece happens in a smaller furnace. Here, they add vanadium and manganese to the steel. These metals increase strength and toughness. Once the liquid metals have blended together, a crackling cauldron takes the mixture and drains it into 6 individual molds. These shape the alloy into long rectangular rows. The challenge now is to cut them down to smaller pieces called billets. For that, they fire up a battalion of deadly gas torches.
These might look like lightsabers, but they're actually oxycutters. They don't just melt the steel, they heat it up so much that it catches fire. They literally burn through the metal.
The smouldering steel billets are too hot to handle, so they're discharged onto a roller table and allowed to cool as they move along. Crafting an axe head from bars that weigh nearly 1.5 tons would take superhuman strength. The solution is to thin and narrow the billets with a rolling mill. First, it's back into the fire. The steel bakes until it reaches around 1150 degrees and gets nice and soft. Then the billets pass through rollers, anything between 15 and 20 times, depending on the size they're after.
Rolling mills were invented 500 years ago by Leonardo da Vinci. But actually, it's more accurate to say that he imagined them because, like so many of his drawings, he didn't have the technology at the time to build them.
The billets are now giant steel planks that travel like neon lightning towards an automated cooling bed. What look like rows and rows of dragon's teeth lift the steel, carrying it forward a notch before placing it gently back on the bed. This keeps it flat and straight while it cools. At last, the steel is ready for veterlings to make axes. No tool-swinging, apron-wearing Vikings here. This isn't the Dark Ages. Automated forging hammers that look like giant chewing mouths will be doing the metal bashing. But before feeding these beasts, the steel has to be soft enough to chew. An induction heater passes an electrical current through a section of steel. And in about the time it takes to microwave some leftovers, the steel reaches 1200 degrees Celsius. One snip cuts off a 3/4 kilo slab of steel. It takes more than 100 strikes to shape and balance the head. Each stroke crushes the steel with nearly 100 tons of force.
Blacksmiths have to work quickly before the metal cools down. And this is where the expression, strike while the iron is hot, comes from.
Next, the axe goes to Rickard Janssoons, who may have one of the strangest looking jobs you've ever seen.
It's a grinding hose where you use your weight to increase the power so you get a more efficient grind.
With every bounce, Rickard hones and sharpens the blade. Next, they toughen up the leading edge in a process called hardening. By heating and quickly cooling the metal, carbon atoms are locked into place, making the steel stronger.
A similar process occurs naturally, except it takes many millions of years. Carbon is brought up by volcanoes and is hardened, and the pure carbon is transformed into diamonds.
After experiencing the school of hard knocks, the metal needs a bit of stress relief. In a process known as annealing, an oven heats, then slowly cools the metal. This reduces tension in the material that can cause brittleness. The next issue is the axe heads are too rough. So a robo-polisher waves each one like a wand, back and forth between spinning buffing wheels. This clears the edge of the last jagged burrs. The axe's quest is nearly finished. Now each is ready for a handle. For that, they use hickory wood, sourced from Alabama in the United States. A lathe carves the curved shape of the handle. And then the wood gets a quick dip in a bath of linseed oil to protect its surface.
Linseed oil is a great wood preservative, but just be careful. It reacts with air and gets really hot. So hot, it can burst into flames.
The trouble is, the axe handles are still too rough to use comfortably. So they toss them into this rotating tumbler. Inside, a cascade of wooden balls smooths the handles by rubbing against them. After half an hour, they're ready. To stop the head quite literally flying off the handle, a hydraulic press wedges it in, using a force of 1,000 kilograms. Once sheathed and shipped, it's job done. Whether wielded by a Bjorn or a Bob, the mighty axe will continue to provide fuel for the fire. Still to come, delivering a messenger bag for all weathers and building the world's fastest lifeboats. How do they do it?
Hey y'all, what's up?
Hey, what's that?
What y'all getting?
Listen, I've been waiting to march down some logs here.
Hi, I'm Matthew. I will be you guys' waiter today. Can I take your order?
Oh, I've been chewing for some grouper dread.
Y'all see this?
See, this ain't gonna work. Where the fish gone, though?
But how, though?
Don't leave our children with no fish in their future. Protect our sea. Protect our way of life. Protect the Bahamas. To learn how you can help, find us on Facebook at Bahamas Protected. See the future.
Colon cancer is the third most common cancer affecting Bahamians. Your risk of developing colon cancer is increased if you have a personal history of colorectal cancer or colon polyps, a family history of colon cancer, or inflammatory bowel diseases such as ulcerative colitis. Other factors that can increase your risk of developing colon cancer are low fiber, high fat diets, a sedentary lifestyle, obesity, smoking, and alcohol. You can take steps to reduce your risk of colon cancer by making specific lifestyle changes. Eat a variety of fruits, vegetables, and whole grains. These foods contain fiber, minerals, vitamins, and antioxidants, which may play a role in cancer prevention. Drink alcohol in moderation or not at all. Do not smoke. Exercise with a goal of getting in at least 30 minutes each day. If you've been inactive, start slowly and gradually build up to 30 minutes. Also, talk to your doctor before starting any exercise program. Maintain a healthy weight. If you're at a healthy weight, maintain it by combining a well-balanced diet with daily exercise. If you need to lose weight, ask your doctor about healthy ways to achieve your goal. Colon cancer screening can also help to prevent colon cancer or lead to its early detection when treatment is most effective. If you're 45 years or older, speak to your doctor about having a colonoscopy or some form of colon cancer screening that may be appropriate for you. I'm Dr. Eugene Marcus Cooper. Pay attention to your health. Get the facts and discuss colon cancer with your physician today.
This message is brought to you by the Ministry of Health in partnership with the Public Hospitals Authority.
Make come
legal documents, precious parcels, and even food. Bicycle messengers are the ultimate traffic-proof urban delivery system. But they wouldn't work without the pedal pusher's trusty sidekick, the messenger bag. Not just any old sack will do. These have to be featherweight, stormproof, and loaded with pockets and padding for just about anything. How do they do it? Londoners call them cycle couriers. New Yorkers, bicycle messengers. And they're a familiar sight in cities all around the world.
The first bike couriers were used by newspapers and banks in Paris in the 1870s. But back then, the streets were cobbled, and they had to ride those weird penny-farthing bikes with wooden wheels, so they were a lot slower than today's couriers, and presumably in a lot more pain.
The place where modern bike messenger culture began is San Francisco. And it's one tough city to navigate. As many as 200 professional messengers power through the city's congested streets and arduously hilly terrain.
A San Francisco courier cycles 300 miles a week. That's about 500 kilometers. Okay, now think about it. If a courier was to cycle in a straight line every 10 weeks, that courier could cycle all the way across from San Francisco to New York City.
And while the messenger's bags were once merely tools of the trade, today their appeal has gone mainstream. Timbuktu boss Patti Casato has witnessed the evolution.
It started really out of function. Make sure it's waterproof when it's raining or fogging out. But what it ended up turning out to be was a really cool fashion statement as well. So now you'll see people wearing, bike messenger bags for a fashion statement.
Here in store, customers can create their own design and pick it up the same day.
So you have options here to color the left, center, and right panels. You could do something really fun where you do a reflective material or something patterned.
From custom color schemes to bespoke compartments.
So you can add a Crater laptop sleeve, which will hold your 15-inch MacBook.
Today's messenger bags have to keep pace with changing technology and lifestyles.
The first messenger bags weren't messenger bags at all. They were actually designed for linemen, those guys who climb the poles to fix the electricity and telephone wires. They used the bags to carry their tools to keep their hands free.
The job of filling each design goes across town to the factory. And there are so many options that last year, out of 80,000 custom bags, no two were the same. Their challenge is how to mass-produce bags when each one is unique. The answer? On the factory floor, they have over 50 giant rolls of different fabrics and colours ready to go. They've got the process down cold, from raw material to finished bag in just 7 minutes. Ready, steady, go! Each bag is made up of 3 panels or sections. So the first step is to carve the raw materials into the shapes of the bag panels. They are then stitched together into one piece. The next step is to attach the grab handles at the top of the bag. It may look pretty, but that won't mean anything if it can't do its job. And one of the most important is keeping your valuables dry. To make sure the rain stays out, a protective waterproof liner seals the bag.
We've actually done some pretty fun things with the liners. We've been able to drink beer out of the bags, and on one occasion we actually ate cereal out of there, full on with milk.
With the beer and breakfast-proof barrier installed, it's time for the messenger bag to take its final shape. At the next station, a worker folds the fabric and sews the sides together. As the bag moves down the line, here come the finishing touches. The edge stitching. An all-important strap. Time's up. And it's in the bag. The ultimate rescue boat. Faster than the wind. More powerful than a towering wave. Sailors in distress never fear. Thanks to this technical and engineering marvel. The Dutch lifeboat service will save the day. How do they do it? When you're saving lives at sea, every second counts.
You lose body heat 25 times faster in water than you do on land. In freezing water, you'd probably lose consciousness after 15 minutes, and you're not likely to survive after 45.
If disaster strikes, not every boat can range far out to sea, survive stormy waters, and do it at speed. This is where Damen comes in. The Dutch company have been building specialised fast rescue vessels since 1969, and they're still going strong. They sell rescue boats all over the world, but one of their most important customers is KNRM, the Royal Netherlands Sea Rescue Institution. They operate in the North Sea, one of the busiest seas in the world.
Every 24 hours, over 1,000 ships will sail in the North Sea. But it also has some terrible weather. Hurricane-force winds, thick fog, and massive rogue waves. This sea needs a top-notch rescue service.
Shipbuilders like design engineer John Niebuhr set out to build a new type of lifeboat. One that could travel at speed, even in rough seas.
We want to have a smaller, more lean and mean ship.
One of the biggest problems facing marine emergency crews across the globe is slamming, a term used to describe hitting the water hard after riding over a wave. Slamming slows the boat down and can injure the crew.
Slamming is just as stressful as it sounds. Every time the boat hits the waves, it's like crashing a car. Imagine doing that over and over and over for a couple of hours at sea.
For a solution, the company collaborated with the University of Delft on an experiment that looks like big boy bath time fun. This special wave pool can recreate conditions out at sea. The classic rescue boat rides over the waves, sliding from trough to peak to trough. The engineers observe that by changing the hull shape, they can build a rescue boat that literally slices through waves. Their design is called the Sea Axe. The Sea Axe is a steep-sided hull. It's thinner and sharper at the leading edge than other vessels. That means it cuts through the waves rather than being pushed up and over them, reducing G-forces from slamming by 45%, and at the same time increasing its top speed to almost 60 kilometers an hour. The Sea Axe is a champ against head-on waves. But waves can come from all directions. Waves crashing into the boat from the sides make it much harder to control and could cause it to capsize. The design team came up with an ingenious solution. A pair of carbon fibre fins at the rear of the craft increase stability, and in calm seas, they can be retracted to optimise manoeuvrability. However, every hero has its kryptonite. The biggest problem is that sometimes waves come out of nowhere. So they wanted their new boat to have a special ability. If waves flip it over, the boat rights itself, with all systems still running. To prove it works, the team set up a capsize test with the crew inside.
Don't try this at home. Most boats are top-heavy, and once they lean past a certain angle, that's it. They're going over. But in this boat, the deck house is light and watertight, and the heavy engines are at the bottom, so it should naturally right itself.
success. The cab's dry, the engines aren't flooded, meaning its mission can continue. This new vessel can range for nearly 650 kilometres. And with a crew of 6, it can pick up and carry 100 survivors to safety. In brightest day or blackest night, if there's trouble on the sea, nothing stops this rescue boat.
From the pages of Freedom Fight, The March to Independence by Audra Tynes.
They are men, Audra Tynes. The background. Hooray! Hooray! There was major construction at hand. To complete the work at the airport sites, local workers were in demand. But their excitement got a blow and anger set in because the Americans working the project were making far more than them. They labored just as hard. They labored just as long. So a desire for their fair share in pay became their rousing song.
Complaints were cast at the labor leaders of the day, who drafted a letter on the workers' concerns about their pay. But their petition seemed to have been ignored, despite some mention of an advisory board.
So on May 31st, gathered by the score, fed-up laborers began to roar. They told executives at the main field that they were men and that their demands were real. Other promises were made, and the men were asked to vacate. Tempers flared and tension grew. A cut above store's eye further fueled the dispute. The bus stop. Unplanned, unrehearsed, uncued, armed with sticks and machetes. From the construction site to Bay Street they moved, fearless. They sung out. The zeal did grow. Burma Road declared war on the Conky-Joe. They sought authorities' attention once more, but the response angered them like never before. With the fling of a bottle, the riot did start. Windows were smashed on shops and on cars. Oh, the looting and plundering were done by the score. There was great ransack to the white-owned stores. Alcohols especially were taken in high numbers, and in Grantstown, the men enjoyed their plunder. The Riot Act was read, and some asked for martial law to be declared. Police fired into a clamorous crowd, and several men were shot. One died later, another died on the spot. Angered by the death of their fellow man in the plight, the crowd became destructive and attacked several sites. The police station and public library are examples of these. The police returned to the scene right away, and the military curfew was set without delay. Quiet and peace prevailed through the night, but after the curfew ended that morning, there was a familiar sight. The crowd of looters was at it once more. One was even killed by the shopkeeper of a store. Eventually, the rioting dwindled away, and the Duke granted continued negotiations about their pay. Rioters were punished for their roles in the act. A number received jail sentences, in fact. Though no major changes occurred immediately after, the Burma Road riot was certainly a precursor
to other events where blacks said enough, no matter the loss, and stood up for what they thought was right, no matter the cost.
Going down Burma Road, going down Burma Road, going down Burma Road. I can't let nobody, don't let nobody, don't let nobody, don't let nobody, don't let nobody. Going down Burma Road, going down Burma Road, going down Burma Road. I can't let nobody.
You're watching the ZNS Network, the People's Station.
Described by some as the Abraham Lincoln of the Bahamas and by others as the Bahamian Marcus Garvey, this businessman, philanthropist, and civic activist, along with people like the late Charles Rodriguez, Edgar Bain, Dr. C.R. Walker, Clarence Bain, and Maxwell Thompson, fought for the Bahamas that we today enjoy. In paying tribute to Sir Milo in 1973, the late Sir Lyndon Oscar Pinling had this to say.
In the 37 years in which Sir Milo Butler has colored the politics of the Bahamas, he has moved from the lonely voice crying in the wilderness against the oppression and injustices inflicted by a minority upon a majority to the high office of Governor General in an independent Bahamas. Many of our senior citizens recall with fondness the generosity and the compassion of the man MB as he moved through the hospital wards, distributing his own money to help those less fortunate than himself. Many recall his success in business, carved out against many adversities with sheer hard work and human industry. Many of our not-so-senior citizens recall the iron will, resolve, and determination of Sir Milo, demonstrated when he went to the office of the then colonial secretary demanding the discharge of 2 men wrongly and cruelly imprisoned. And we all recall 1956, when this champion of the people joined hands with a group of men, most of them many years his junior. Together, these men faced the electorate for the first time as a reforming political party. I remember, too, the general strike of 1958. Sir Milo, while determined that the taxicab union get a fair decision from the ruling oligarchy, he was level-headed enough still to counsel and advise that unity lay in numbers and that victory lay in peaceful but forceful demonstration. Whenever there was a call for justice and wherever there was a fight for the freedom and dignity of man to live and work with equal pay and decent conditions in this country, Sir Milo Butler was there. Burma Road, 1942. The General Strike, 1958. Black Tuesday, 1965. January 10th, 1967. And July 10th, 1973. These are all part of the history of the struggle for freedom in the modern Bahamas. And on each occasion, Sir Milo was there. He is a humble but wise man, a compassionate but determined man, a good and a great man. The nation has afforded him the highest seat in the land. It was the least it could do. I am sure that he will continue the work he so ably began long before I was born. Work that will continue to affect the days, the times, and the generations beyond tomorrow.
But who was this man, and what made him different? What were the values that governed his life? What were the things that he held dear? How can we take a page from his life not only to improve ourselves, but also to help improve the quality of life for our fellow men? This one-hour documentary examines the life of a man who, though large in stature, was a friend to the small man. Though considered wealthy, was kind to the poor, and though powerful, a humble soul.
Milo Boughton Butler, affectionately known to his friends as MB, was born on the 11th of August, 1906, to the late George and Frances Butler. He was the third of 10 children and the only son to survive. His father died when Milo was only 14 years old, and so he was forced to leave school to care for his mother and 7 sisters. During the Great Depression of the 1920s, times were hard in the Bahamas, and like many other families, the Butler family relocated to the United States of America. They settled in a place called Hastings, Florida. Here, young Milo continued to develop his entrepreneurial skills by working odd jobs, which included door-to-door trading, as well as serving as a cook in different hotels and restaurants. His role as provider for his family started at an early age.
In the early days of my mother's life, she had lost her father, and Milo, as the only son, took charge of the family, literally brought his sisters up. He himself went off to Florida in search of work, and while there, he brought the family, all of his sisters and his mother, to Florida, where he cared for them. I know my mom would tell me often about sandwiches and steaks that were specially cooked by him because he had been working in a restaurant and brought for them. So to a great extent, they became citizens of both countries.
The Butler family returned to Nassau in 1927, and on October 14th, 1928, Sir Milo married a beautiful Long Island girl, Caroline Loretta Watson. She became his lifelong friend and partner. This union, like that of his parents, George and Francis, produced 10 children. Together, they taught their children the value of hard work and the same religious values that were instilled in him as a youngster. And the children knew that Milo and Caroline were a team.
The two sets of children in the Butler family, the older set, beginning with Edna, Raleigh, Emmy, Joseph, and Nita. They were the older ones. And then the younger group started with Milo Jr., Milo, Frank, Asa, Basil, Matthew, and myself. And so Milo would be like the big brother, and he would control things, and we'd watch movies on Sunday evenings, you know. And I could remember these Charlie McCartney movies and these what they call still movies, no sound. And with the writing, for those of us who just learning to read, the older boys would have to read what was on the screen. But those were good days.
He made me realize that I had to learn how to work, and work was something that filled your life. It was an integral part of your life. And he always threw out to all of us, the devil will find work for idle hands to do, and so I'm going to find good work for you to do.
We always had sheep and goats and chickens and cows and you name it. And we were supposed to be taking care of those, and we know that that was a regular chore that you had to do. And sometimes we were trying to be like we were ducking, and we were supposed to make sure that all these creatures were watered and fed every day. And so you knew when you came home from school, you were supposed to make sure nobody should have to tell you, to make sure that the animals had water. Even though we were boys, we had to do a lot of scrubbing, particularly in the shop and whatnot. So we used to dread, I used to hate to know when the weekend comes, because you had to scrub the shop. And my brother just before me, Milo, and I particularly were, at one stage of the game, were tied to doing that. And because he was kind of speedy and good, you know, when I say speedy and good, he could scrub fast and clean. So he'd be finished long before I finished, and you really want to get out of there so fast to go do something else if you could sneak out, but you know you got to do that, you can't duck that. Later on, we developed into the situation where we had to go and do ice delivery. So that was another chore as we got older. And you're getting up at 4:30 in the morning to be to the ice house so that you can be the first truck on the line, because you got to get your ice, go out and deliver it. And be finished in time to get to school. The ice thing was every day, every morning, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, morning before school and evening after school. And of course, we had other things to do, like trying to assist with cleaning the house. So everybody had their fair share of the load to carry.
Christmas time was the happiest time because that's when Santa Claus came. And usually you didn't get what you actually wrote to Santa Claus for. My parents were not into the toys and that sort of thing. We got dolls as girls, the boys got little trucks and so on, but they basically gave you things they felt you needed, and books were very high in that. But these were things that you learned to appreciate. Christmas was the best time. It was the time when there was a lot of food around, a lot of people around, and it was the time when we were allowed to have a drink of wine. And we all looked forward to that. My daddy had a ritual, and he would line us up after Christmas dinner. And we were lined up in the order in which we were born. My oldest sister first, going right down the line. Only the baby didn't get it. The baby was too young at the time, but when the baby started to walk, we all got a little wine glass of wine. We as children could not go and say, Daddy, can we go to such and such a place and get an answer from him? He would say, I'm sorry, you'll have to ask your mother. And we'll go, Mama, Daddy sent us to ask you if we could go to such and such movies like on a Friday afternoon. And she will say, ask your father. But we asked him and he sent him to you. Well, I think you better go ask him again. Daddy, Mama said we should come and ask you again. Well, tell her if she allows you to go, I might be able to give you the money. So we go back to her. And she'll say, well, if he said you could go, you could go. But it was that sort of thing. And decisions about us were, as far as I can remember, never made unless both of them agreed. It was they were just together as far as we were concerned.
In addition to rearing a family, this couple also started a family business, Milo, Butler and Sons, which has grown into a successful family-operated organization, which still exists to this very day.
Our legacy, to my mind, does not go back only to Sir Milo and Lady Caroline, but our legacy goes further back to my grandmother, Frances, and her husband, George, and it goes back further than that to George's father, who was Israel, and it goes beyond that to Israel's father, who was Milo, the old Milo Butler we are inclined to call him. That good gentleman was in business and apparently ran a pretty decent business, right? I mean, to the point that he was exporting products that he grew out of Eleuthera and Ramkey. He was exporting them to Europe. So when I look back and see exactly our tie to the business, I must say it's no accident. I mean, and you wonder where the genes come from or how did you get there? And perhaps that is part of how we got where we are and why I am comfortable doing the business that we are doing.
I remember in my role as chairman of Junior Achievement, when we were doing research as to who were the individuals who had gone above and beyond shaping the modern Bahamas as we know it today, our research showed that Sir Milo Butler was worthy of inclusion in a group of 10 that included people like Sir Stafford Sands and E.P. Taylor at Lyford Key and the Ericksons from Inagua, and Wallace Groves from Freeport, and Warren Tripp from Eleuthera. These are the people who really, up and beyond the realm of the ordinary, helped to shape the modern Bahamas. Here is Milo, whose contribution is generally seen in the political and social arena, where he's also being recognized as one of the architects of the economy. Now that makes him a very rare breed, and it's an aspect of his life that is often overlooked. Now, in that regard, there's one thing that I think is particularly worthy of note. The fact that he built a business, Milo, Butler and Sons, an organization, and he built that strong enough that it survives today, and it survives with the family still in control of it, a son running it. I mean, that is a wonderful model for all Bahamian families with a business orientation to follow. I mean, it's just a wonderful legacy. If you really think about it, the Rockefellers in America became the Rockefellers, for example, because they survived more than one generation. The Kennedys, all the great families in developed countries become great because, not just because there was a great patriarch or matriarch, as the case may be, but that patriarch or matriarch was strong enough to build a sufficient of a structure within the family that it could survive his or her passing. And Sir Milo has done that.
In the 1930s, Sir Milo got involved in politics, a time when the Bahamas was quite different from what it is today. Things that today we take for granted, people of his generation could not even imagine. Racism was rampant, and black Bahamians were second-class citizens.
What I think this generation ought to know is that things were not always as they happen to be presently in the country. Racial discrimination, segregation, the suppression of secondary education, all of that were obstacles that had to be overcome for us to reach the stage that we eventually attained in '67 when majority rule came.
It is difficult to explain to young people what we had to live through during that period. And the overriding problem of that period was, of course, racism. We lived in a society where racism was the order of the day.
I went to the government high school, and there's a place called Black's Candy Kitchen where we used to get our lunch. They serve the black ones out from the window, and the white ones can go inside and eat.
There were places where, as a black man, I couldn't go. Theaters, restaurants, and the hotels.
In terms of employment, there were few choices. You either worked for the government or the Bay Street merchants. These persons not only controlled the economic power, but also the political power, and there was no such thing as a secret ballot.
The vast majority of those who were employed worked either in the civil service for the government, which was controlled, as was the economy also, by the Bay Street Boys, who after '56 became formalized as the United Bahamian Party. You either work for the government or you work for some enterprise that was owned or controlled by them. It must be realized also that the secret ballot only came into play in 1949. In 1949, prior to that, all the elections, including the elections in 1942, there was open ballot, open voting. And you could imagine the intimidation factor that came into play when you went to the polls to vote, and the candidates were your employer. That's how it was up to 1949.
They wanted total control over the country, which they had the economic lifeblood of the country. They decided who could get into business, who could open a shop, who could sell liquor, who could do this and who could do the next thing. And so it was a classic oligarchy.
That was life, and the people believed in it. This is what I found. They believed that it was good. Discrimination was good for the country, because that's what we were told. We were told, for instance, and this was the propaganda at the time, I call it propaganda, but this was put out, that if we insist on going into hotels, we'll interfere with the tourist industry. And then on my way, I'm now an 18-year-old or thereabouts, going away to England, on a boat called the Araguani, heading for Bristol in England. And on that boat was some representative from the Caribbean who were trying to see if they can salvage the political union at the time among the Caribbean countries. And among them was a judge from Nigeria, and I remember his name, Mr. Justice Rhodes. He's a black Nigerian. You see, he was a puny judge. Well, I didn't know anything about what a puny judge was. I thought that was a tiny judge. Well, so I looked at him. He says he's a puny judge. He didn't look so puny to me. So he says, "Where are you from?" I was smart. I'm from the Bahamas. Boy, like I see him frown. He says, "Boy, that's a terrible place." He was on a cruise. And he says, the cruise ship stopped here. And he said, "I'm tired of this food on the boat. I want to see and get some native food." So he goes straight to the restaurant and tell him, "We don't serve you here, you people here." That's what they told him. So he goes around and he goes to another one and they tell him the same thing. He says, "The heck with it." He says, "Anyway, let me get a haircut, because they can't cut my kind of hair on the ship." So he goes to this barber shop. He says, as soon as this fella says, "You know, if you come for a haircut, we cannot cut your kind of hair." So he says to the fella, "You got the same kind of hair that I got. Why can't you cut it?" He says, "You hear what I say? We don't cut it in here." Anyway, he says, he feels insulted. He says to the wife, you know he's going, "Well, let's go in the cinema and waste time." Of course, he went into the cinema, and of course, you know, they chucked him out to tell him, "You can't come in here." And he says that was the experience. He says he will never come to the Bahamas again. I then thought, I said, "Well, you know something? I think this fella is right." I didn't understand. I didn't know he was right all this time.
In 1956, Sir Milo joined the PLP and continued working on behalf of his people. He never sought leadership but worked with those younger men like Lyndon Pinling and Arthur Hanna for the rights of black Bahamians. He was considered a father figure and the ultimate team player.
By the end of the 50s, things began to move because there was demonstration. We would go into a restaurant and we sit down and we take up as many seats as we can so they can't get any business. And then we have some fellas outside telling the people who come, it look like they're coming, "Don't go in there." Several people have been reported having food poisoning or things like that, you know. So that restaurant, we got rid of that one. They decided that their ways of wickedness was at an end. And things like that. And finally, it came to a head because it came to a head because the PLP is growing in numbers now.
In those years, 1956 to 1962 and on until 1967, Bahamas was clearly in transition, and great movements were afoot. And the masses, the masses of the people, the black people of this country, were awakening. They were awakening. They were awakening to the fact that they had been in a back position for centuries, and and that they had inherited this status from their forefathers. They were becoming alive to that and realizing that they had to do something about it.
In 1956, Milo was that voice out there shouting above everybody else's. And I could vividly remember, at that time they had rules for the parliamentarians speaking for the length of time that they could speak. They had, Sir Asa Pritchard was then the Speaker of the House, and Sir Asa had an hourglass on his desk because Sir Milo always spoke long.
He was always concerned about the straw vendors and their welfare. In the House of Assembly, after, you know, when they were having a hard time with the governing party and we were in opposition, whenever there was something afoot in the House, we would be advised that something was going on and we should see what's going on and we should go over there, we meaning the straw vendors. So we would go over there in a group and stand around to see what was going to happen.
And the first time Milo was asked to sit down, he told them that he has a lot to say for the people and about the people, and he was not about to sit down. Well, that happened on many occasions, and Milo refused. I mean, listen, he was about to jump over that desk if he was able to get at that man. He says, I don't hate the white man, it's just that I hate his ways. And he will not sit down because the people of Baintown sent me here. And so this particular day, I think Sir Asa was fed up to his teeth, and he said, either you sit or I will name you. Sir Milo said, well, you're going to have to name me. And they named Sir Milo. At that point, when I finally understood what was really happening, I dashed out of the House of Assembly. The straw vendors were, I think they were placed in Rawson Square. And I ran out of the House of Assembly and I told the ladies, shouting at the top of my voice, they're about to throw Mr. Butler out of the House of Assembly, y'all come.
And she said that all the straw vendors dropped what they were doing and they ran across the street.
By the time I got back to the House of Assembly, they actually named Sir Milo, and because he would not sit down, they had two big policemen lifted Mr. Butler bodily out of his chair. I think they brought a chair down too. I think Sir Milo just refused to let go of the chair. And by the time we got downstairs, and you know, Mr. Butler was a big man, and so they had a problem getting him down that narrow stairway. The House of Assembly was surrounded with people.
And of course, my aunt, Beulah, the one that took care of the children, she was in the forefront, and she rushed up to the police. But by that time, the policemen were coming down with him from upstairs, and they were outside with him, and when she got there, they were just about to put him down, and she used to stammer. So she walked up to the police, she'd say, arrest him down easy. They don't let him drop, arrest him down easy.
Between 1956 and 1962, the PLP continued to grow in numbers and in momentum. Sir Geoffrey Johnstone recounts his introduction to Sir Milo during this period.
1962. When I was elected to Parliament, I think that was probably, I'd be more accurate to say that was my earliest recollection of Sir Milo. I was running as a candidate for the House of Assembly. So was Sir Milo. He was larger than life. He was larger than life just to look at, but he was larger than life in his whole makeup and in his whole character, and of course he was a crusader for his cause. Great speaker, a marvelous rabble-rouser. I don't mean that in a contemptuous sense, but he was able to arouse a crowd with his his homespun oratory. He drew big audiences. That was a very tumultuous election. He was in the forefront of the political awakening of the Bahamas, and he was his own pioneer before Mr. Pinling got into it and a lot of other people.
Following 30 years of opposition politics, on January 10, 1967, Milo Butler and his party, the PLP, with the cooperation of Sir Alban Brennan and Sir Randall Fox, became the government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. From 1967 to 1973, Milo served in the cabinet as Minister of Health and Welfare, Minister of Labor, Agriculture and Fisheries. On August 1st, 1973, Milo was sworn in as the first Bahamian Governor General. He was knighted in the Queen's birthday honors of 1973 and made a Knight Grand Cross of the Most Excellent Order of St. Michael and St. George. In 1975, during the visit of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, he was again honored and made a Knight Grand Cross of the Royal Victorian Order. Following a lengthy illness, on January 22, 1979, the nation mourned the passing of its hero.
Please don't fence me in, just turn me loose. Let me straddle my old saddle underneath the western sky.
Throughout his life, this veteran, visionary politician, this freedom fighter, this courageous leader left a lasting impression on all who came into contact with him.
Granddaddy and I always loved being together. Every afternoon, after I would get home from school, at Government House, I would go and sit in his office. So the time spent, I would be in his office with him, dialoguing with him, asking him questions about certain things in the government, as little as I knew then at that time, as I was able to put together. But just sort of just watching him and moving around with him. The other times I do remember with him is on Saturdays, he always made it a point to take me someplace that was historic. Fort Charlotte, Fort Montague, and so on. So I really would get a really good view of what the forts meant and all the different things and what happened there. And so I knew where they were and all the rest of it. He tried to make much of my life experience as historic as he possibly could. So he spent a lot of time taking me there. Then there was always going out to the docks. Every afternoon, Monday through Friday, we would go for an afternoon drive, and he would take us out to the docks. And I was always pleased to hear the people calling him Daddy and Daddy, but never understood what it meant. Come to realize later on as I grew older and began to read, and from dialoguing with my cousins and older cousins and uncles and aunts, I began to understand what all of this meant as to why they would call him Daddy, persons in the dock and so on, because of the type of things that he did to help them.
Inside the House of Assembly, he was considered a bulldog, as he worked tirelessly for his people and was never afraid to confront issues that adversely affected them. But outside the House, he was a different person, speaking barely above a whisper, and a gentleman.
Milo was a Christian gentleman who was not ashamed to display outward signs of his Christianity and to ensure that his family members learned good Christian values. Church attendance and Bible knowledge were part of his daily routine.
Milo was a member of the vestry, was a regular worshiper in church every Sunday, and every day during the week as he came from town, he would stop in the parish around midday and pray for a half an hour more just by himself. And Sir Milo was not only a very active member of the parish of St. Matthew's, but he was for many years a member of our diocesan synod and made his contribution to the wider Anglican family here in New Providence and in the Family Islands. Particularly, he supported the re-entrance of the diocese into the field of education with the foundation of St. John's College, and then later with the coming into being of St. Anne's High School, because he was a great supporter of education for all the people, not only for those who could afford it, but for the wider community.
Whenever we visited his home, and I recall this at the age of about 8, 9, we were called upon to recite the Psalms. And so I was taught at an early age to recite Psalm 1, Psalm 27, Psalm 23. Oh, I can't remember. We went on and on every Sunday from about 3 in the afternoon through until 5. We sat at Uncle Milo's knees, as it were, and we memorized Psalms. And that was not just his children. It included his sister's children, that's Jane, his other sister Elise, who has 2 children, and anyone in the neighborhood who he could catch in order to make sure that they learnt their Bible.
Sundays was a special day in that being good Anglicans, we always had to go to Mass and go to Sunday school and go to afternoon Sunday school, and the adults would go to the church in the night.
St. Matthew's, we were done everything, christened there and everything else. We went there. I was a Sunday school teacher. Sue and Charlotte, these were our people, our cousins right in the yard. We all went together and we lived together. And after the Sunday school, they'll come to us and we'll have our dinner because we were one family.
He involved his family in all the, well, first of all, as a church group, and in his businesses. Milo B. Butler and Sons, and today his legacy is carried on by his sons and daughter, who uphold that same tradition, that consciousness of service to God and service to their fellow human beings.
He was a generous man and encouraged people to save. Many people benefited from his generosity, including family islanders, straw vendors, contract workers, persons in hospital, and anyone trying to get ahead. He wanted to make a better way of life for his people and did all he could to ensure it. He was a man of impeccable character, and so he was well trusted throughout the Bahama Islands.
Sir Milo was a very generous person, generous with his time, his abilities, and his finances. And he would support the activities of the parish in any way that he was called upon. And he supported many of his needy brothers and sisters by assisting them financially and materially.
He was a helpful person. He was not just interested in himself and his family. He was concerned about the Bahamian people, the masses. The straw vendors can tell you about his personality and his generosity, because he initiated for them, or I should say for us, because I'm one of them, he initiated a savings plan for Christmas. And he would come around every day and collect whatever you had, however small. He would collect it, take your name, put down the amount, and at Christmas time, you had some monies to look forward to.
When the British colonial was built and was operating, and the Victoria, which were the kind of older hotels, one of the things that he did, he recognized that these Family Island farmers who had livestock as well as their produce that they grew, quite often would ship them down and really not get a market. He established himself as a reliable person, and people more and more got to know about him, and they recognized that they sent him their products, whether they were livestock or whether they were the farm type, the agricultural stuff. They would be sure to get their money. And so he established himself from the very early days of being a person of integrity. He became to be more well-known, and the project continued to grow. That is, the fellows that used to go to Florida and the United States to do farming. We used to call it on the contract or on the project. A lot of those people would kind of ask him to please collect their funds for them and hold it or give it to their, so much to their wife or whatever, so when they came home they could have their funds. I mean, and he was really, to my mind, really, really very reliable. I mean, and people felt good. They know that if they left $100 or he collected $100 for them, they could rest assured that they can get $100.
For many years, Sir Milo visited the wards of the then Bahamas General Hospital and later Princess Margaret. And as he visited the wards, not only praying with the sick, but would share some of his finances with the needy ones in hospital.
When we get there, the nurses will say, well, now you got to let these get some time, and then we'll have little packages and put some on different places and find out what they could eat and what they don't like. We would make little bags and packages. We did that.
The first time that I really dealt with him one-on-one, I was buying a piece of property, and I wanted to pay for it so that I could have the title deeds in hand. And I went to him and I asked him if he would help me to complete payment for this property. So he said, yeah, go ahead, I'll help you. And he helped me to pay for this property.
Many of us, me and my family and I, benefited from Sir Milo's generosity during those days when we were sort of hand to mouth, because the struggle was the important thing for us. So Sir Milo helped people individually, and he also helped the movement. He put not only his mouth, but his money into the movement.
Sir Milo, in so many ways, gave that example of a deeply Christian individual on fire for the rights and privileges of all people, regardless of race, color, or creed. And one who not only demanded of others, was willing to share with others from his own pocket.
This Christian and civic commitment was no doubt the result of the home environment in which he grew up. His mother, Frances Butler, née Thompson, was a Christian woman, was a member of the Bahamas branch of the London chapter of the Queen Mary Needlework Guild, the Improved Benevolent and Protective Order of Elders of the World, and the Order of the Eastern Star fraternal organization. She is recognized as a pioneer in social work in the Bahamas, and together with Mrs. Violet Chase, Mrs. Blanche Thurston, and Mrs. U.J. Mortimer, established the Mothers Club of the Bahamas. She was also responsible for the formation of the Young Women's Christian Association, the Young Men's Christian Association, and the Silver Bells.
Most persons will remember his mother, Mother Frances Butler, who was a deeply Christian lady too, with a great social conscience, who cared for the needy, and was one of the founders of the Mothers Club.
Yeah, sometimes we go in Malcolm's Park, sometimes we let the food be in the house, and they make themselves happy by the park and in the house and all like that.
What were the lessons learned from this outstanding son of the Bahamas and national patriot? What was his legacy?
Be humble. Keep your feet on the ground. Don't get too high and mighty, because if you get high and turning your nose up, remember now, the fellas that